Okay. We were just talking about rate times time equals distance at the end of the last class. Is that correct? Okay, so now we are now ready to start talking about did I do the an example like question 7 talking about a fence or not? A fence, yes. Okay, so let's start with an example like a fence. Because the cool thing about math is every real world thing that you apply math to is always different. So you have to like have a different example for everything. So every word kind of problem has its own special way. So you have to learn more and more and more. And so imagine you're living on a house on a beautiful street. Like when I was a little child, we lived on Glen Street. Have you ever been on Glen Street? It's near this campus. And they actually knocked down my childhood house in order to build Falcon Glen. So it's a little bit sad, but that's all right. So if you have imagine you have a house or whatever, like this is your house back here. And would you have a fence between your own house and your own front yard? Would you have a fence like blocking your front door or not? You wouldn't, right? But you'd have a fence maybe on the two sides, like between your neighbors' houses, right? And you'd have a fence maybe between the street to keep people out if you're like a little bit mean or whatever. So to like keep people off your flowers and stuff. So, and chances are that if you're really, really vain, are any of you like vain? Do you want to like look really extra fancy or whatever, like really rich and stuff? You might put an expensive fence on the bottom, right? So some of you, so remember this example? So an expensive fence on the bottom, and you might have like a cheaper fence. Well, not really cheaper because that sounds bad, but I'll say an inexpensive fence on the sides. An expensive fence on the sides, inexpensive fence on the sides. And of course, you don't need a fence to block your house from its own yard. So there's no fence like between your house and its own yard. So there's a diagram of your fence, and it makes a rectangle. So we're gonna say the two inexpensive sides, that's like the height or whatever, and then the expensive part, that's the width of your yard. So two inexpensive fences, one expensive fence, and together they're the three sides of your fence. Who knows the word perimeter? Like all the way around. So obviously, all the way around the whole, so houses are usually built on rectangular lots. So like this whole entire thing right here that your house is built on, that's called a lot or a rectangle. I'll just say rectangle for short. Rectangle. And the width of the rectangle is a width on the top and the bottom side, and then the height on both the left and the right side. So the perimeter is how long it would take you to walk all the way around. So if I walked all the way around like this, if I walked and walked and walked and walked and walked until I got back to the beginning, I would have had to go across two left and then right across both widths of it. So I would have had to go two widths, and I would have had to go up once, and then I would have had to walk back down on the other side. So I would have had to walk twice for the height of it. So the total perimeter is 2W plus 2H. And each of you has a homework problem that says something about, so let me ask you a question. I know some of you have already done this problem. Do you remember, if you're already done with it, can you tell me the height of not the height, the perimeter that you had? And maybe one of the people who's done with it. What's the perimeter that you had in your problem?
390.
390, okay. So 390, perfect. So the perimeter of your whole entire rectangle is 390, right? Now, so you're done with the problem, right? So I'll let you give the rest of your information as well. So what's the price of the inexpensive fence?
$4 per foot.
$4 per foot. And what's the price of the expensive fence?
$28 per foot.
Okay, so you have a fancy expensive fence in the front of your property to like look impressive to like the people that drive by. But then you have a cheaper fence along the sides to just like keep your neighbors away. So the first equation that we've done, that's just the geometric equation for like walking around the whole property, right? The distance to walk, it doesn't matter if you have a fence or not. even if there's no fences at all, it'd still take you 390 feet to walk around the whole property. Now we're gonna have to pay for the fence though. So you're gonna have to pay for two of the two sides, the two heights of it. That costs $4 each, right? So those two sides cost $4 each. And then the width, I don't have to pay for the top width of it because I don't have a fence between my house and the yard. I guess there's nothing behind the house either. There's just no fence at all. So there's only one width that I have to pay for, and it costs $28 to pay for that. So I only have to pay for one expensive width of a fence, and I have to pay for two inexpensive heights of the fence. And what's the total cost of your problem?
$3,960.
Wow, that's expensive. 3,960. Wow. Okay, so now the smart thing to do anytime you're setting up these problems is take a step back and try to see if you can make it easier. Because it's doing we could solve them now, but it would be more work. If we could make the problem easier, it'd be less work. So do you notice that this ends with a 0 and this has a 2 and this has a 2, so those are all even numbers. If everything is an even number, you can make it twice as easy. How do you make it twice as easy? Just divide by 2. So divide by 2 and everything on both sides. Then you're gonna get W by itself. Then you're gonna get H by itself. Then you're going to get 195, I think. You can double check me if you want. So width by side equals 195. How's that? Okay, then next we have the next equation. So I know everything is an even number again, right? Everything is an even number in the bottom equation. So should I divide everything by 2 again? Yeah, let's just divide everything by 2 again. So divide everything by 2 again in the next equation. And then what happens then? Well, 2 divides into 28 and leaves you with 14, right? So we're left with 14. And in the next 2 cancels out the 2, so you're left with nothing except for just the 4 and the H. By the way, do they still have 4H groups? Like 4H, has anybody ever heard of 4H? Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So what is 3960 divided by 2? Good question. I wish I had my calculator still. 3960 divided by 2 is, I could probably actually do this in my head. That'd be 1980. 1980, okay, perfect. Okay, who's the person who likes the 1980s? Who was the one who liked the 1980s? Forgot. But anyway,
It was somebody with 10.
somebody likes the 1980s. Oh yeah, so this is in honor of you. Okay, so there's our next equation. Are we okay? So which number is smallest in the next equation? 14 or the 4? Yeah, 4. So let's try to get rid of the 4H by doing what?
Divide everything by 4.
Well, yeah, actually we could, except 4 doesn't go to 14, so that wouldn't work. But there's another way of doing it though. There's always another way. How about if I multiply the H on the top by -4? Does that work? I know that that's a little confusing, but don't worry though. It will work. So let's take the top equation multiplied by -4. Boom. And then we're going to get if I distribute the negative times the W, it'd be -4W. If I distribute the -4 times the H, it'd be -4H. If I distribute the -4 times the 195, let's think. 800, -780, I think. Is that right? Yeah, there we go. So here's how, I think that's right. So double check me with the calculator. Does that sound right?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, perfect. Now we're gonna add this up. So 14W plus -4W is 10W. So wouldn't it be cool if we had like 10 wins in a row? 10 W's, that'd be good. So 4H plus -4H, that's nothing. How about 1980 plus -780? What's that? 1200. Okay, perfect. Now what's the next step? Anybody have any ideas? Divide by 10, correct. Divide by 10. And then the 10 goes away, and so you get W equals, what's 1200 divided by 10? 120. So the width is 120. The width is 120. Whoops, sorry. The width is 120. Now, the way that the homework asks you, it does not say what's the width and what's the height. It says which is the longest side, which is the shortest side. We don't know which is the longest and the shortest, so we have to figure it out. So what's the smallest equation that you see on the whole page that's the easiest one to solve? Probably
390 minus 1.
Probably
Yeah, no.
that one right there. W plus H equals 195. That's the smallest one that I can see. So I'm going to write that down again up here. So W plus H equals 195. And now I'm going to plug in the 120 for the W. So 120 plus H equals 195. Now I'm going to subtract the 120 from both sides. And then you get H equals 75. Okay, so which one's longer, 75 or 120? 120. So the questions, the longest side is going to be 120. So that's the first answer. And then the other side is going to be 75. So how's that? Good job. Okay, perfect. Now we have something a whole lot more interesting. How many of you have ever thought about starting a business? Does anybody know anybody who's your age who has a business? Like maybe some of your fellow students, like they might run like a hair business, or they might like run like a shoe business. Like, so I think somebody said they had a shoe business last time, right? Yeah. So good job. So that's a lot of work to have a business, and you have to spend lots of money, and you have to do lots of work, and you have to file tax returns, and it's just, did you know that most businesses are so hard? I think the average life of a business is only like 2 years before it goes out of business. And did you know that, have you ever heard of the Dow Jones Industrial Average, like on the radio? Like the stock market, have you ever heard of the stock market? The Dow Jones Industrial Average is like the 30th most successful companies overall in the world. They have them like on the Dow Jones Industrial Average. Did you know that all 30 of the companies, the last one was General Electric, but it's still in business though, but the other 29 companies pretty much all either went completely bankrupt and disappeared, or they got so small they weren't even relevant anymore. So since they started the Dow Jones Industrial Average, all those companies are basically gone. Like, who's heard of Sears before? You've heard of Sears? So Sears basically like went bankrupt, and like it's not even relevant anymore. Like Amazon.com is even bigger than Sears. Sears used to be the biggest company in the world, and they like sold houses even. Like you could order a house from Sears if you wanted to. So this next question is about businesses, which is really hard to run a business. So what do you have to do in order to have a business? You have to make what? Profit. But before you can make profit though, you have to have what? You have to spend money in order to make money. So cost, right? So cost is defined as a formula. So it looks like C of X. What does that mean? Well, typically a cost has a fixed cost, like buying a building or like buying an airplane or something like that. And then it has a variable cost, or like buying a lawnmower, let's say. You buy a lawnmower first, then you can start mowing yards with it. And after you start mowing yards with it, the only cost you have to pay for is like your gas to like drive to the yard that you mow, and gasoline to put inside the lawnmower. For at least until you run out of until your lawnmower breaks and you have to buy another one or something. So there's the cost. This is called the fixed cost, and this is called the broken cost. Just kidding. The 34 is called the variable cost. Variable cost. And then revenue. What's revenue? Money earned, right? So revenue is equal to, it's usually just your sales price times the quantity. So 45 times X. So I'm gonna ask you a question. If your sales price, if your sales price is $45, isn't that cheating? Because the variable cost is typically the cost of each item for the person who's selling it, or like making the hamburger or whatever, mowing the yard. Is it fair to charge a higher sales price than how much it costs you to actually make it?
Yeah.
Yes, because you have to do what? You have to do all the work and you have to make a profit and you have to like pay for the whole restaurant. You have to pay for your employees and you have to pay for like the lawnmower itself. So basically all your fixed costs and as well as your time and your work and everything, all of that has to be paid for by the difference between the original item's cost and the sales price that you sell it for, right? So it's not cheating anybody to charge more than what you paid for. Because if everybody only charged what you paid for it, then everybody would be slaves, right? So, um, plus, not only would everybody be slaves, but you couldn't have anything advanced because in order to have like more fancy things, you have to pay for fancy equipment like lasers or whatever maybe produces fancy things like computers and stuff. And those big machines that make all those fancy things, they cost a huge amount of money. And you can't pay for all the fixed cost of that technology unless you have a lot more profit. So the question is, what's the profit? What is the profit? Profit equals what? Well, profit is the money that you make, which happens like after you sell something, minus the money that you spent to make it. So profit is always equal to revenue minus cost. So who's ever heard of the kind of pop called RC Cola? Has anybody ever heard of RC Cola? So RC always reminds me of RC Cola. So if you want to make some profit, think about RC Cola. I don't even think it's even very famous anymore, though. It went up, it's still there, I think, but it's not very famous. Profit equals R minus E, revenue minus cost. So the profit would equal revenue minus the cost. Except there's one important thing, though. Anytime you subtract a group of two things, you have to put it in parentheses. Sorry, hold on. Why do you have to put it in parentheses? Because you're subtracting the whole group. So you have to subtract not only the fixed cost of 176,000, you also have to subtract the item cost of $34 times X. I forgot the X, by the way. Does anybody notice I forgot something? I forgot this X right here. So you can't forget anything. Okay, who knows who has anybody ever heard of the video on the internet that's called I Forgot the Blueberries? You ever heard of that? Nobody's ever heard of that? Well, that's tragic. That is really tragic. Hold on. I'm gonna see if I can find it. You really don't want to you don't want to miss out on this. Hold on. Hold on just a second. You ready to see it? So that video is called, that's called You Forgot the Blueberries video. Okay, hold on. Just a second. So how many people, how many of you have ever seen that video before? Nobody? Wow, that used to be like so famous. Like in the early days of the internet. By the way, what happened to my, what happened to my, hold on. Hopefully I didn't lose my thing.
I'm already living more.
Let's see. What did
Yeah.
I think I forgot the blueberries. No. Hold on. Oh, here it is. I found it. Never mind. Okay. Okay. Ready? So we did that. Now, let's go ahead and finish finding the profit. Ready? So what's the profit? What do you do when you have 45x minus 176,000? What do you do? What's 45x minus 34x? 11x minus 176,000. So that's how much money you make. And let's say if you're selling, so what's the selling price? $45. So that's the profit, is 11x minus that. Okay, perfect. Now, it says, what's the profit from selling 21,000 of these radios? So this is the answer to part A. That's the profit itself. And then part B, what?
Simplify it, like, you would, oh, I guess never mind, there's not.
Yeah, there's no equal sign to solve. It's just basically just
So that's
profit
the answer.
equals, yeah. It's just profit equals, and you actually just leave the X in it. Yep, you don't have to solve it for X. You just calculate the total amount of profit based on the price of 45 minus this cost of 34X and so forth. Now, part B, though, it says how much profit is made from selling 21,000 radios? How much profit is made from selling 21,000 radios? Well, it'd be 11 times 21 minus 176,000. So what's 11 times 21?
Zero, 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 zero.
132? Mine. Oh, I'm sorry, the 21. I meant 21,000. My fault. I meant to say 21,000. Okay, forget that. Never mind. Don't. It's what the problem said. In part B, it just says, how much money do you make if you sell 21,000? So you have to plug in the 21,000. Sorry, my fault. So what's 11 times 21,000? That's 132, you said, plus 000 minus 176,000, right? And then how much is that? Wait. Is that going to be negative? Wait, is that correct? I think that's that's a mistake. Sorry, I didn't use a calculator. I'm sorry. 11 times 21, I think it's a little bit bigger than that. 231. 11 times 21,000 is 231,000. My fault. I probably heard you wrong. It's actually 231,000. So what's 231,000 minus 176,000? What's 231,000 minus 176,000? It is 55,000. Now, does that sound like a lot of money? 55,000. So, but remember though, money is relative to how much work you had to do for it though. How much work do you think it would actually take to build 21,000 radios? So did you know the one time I had a job and I had to stamp a date onto like a coupon? It was like, this coupon is good until like March 24th or something, and I'd stamp that date on the coupon. And I had to do that on 34,000 coupons, and it was really tough. So even just stamping a date on something is really hard to do for lots of thousands of things. But if you had to make 21,000 radios, that'd probably be like 1 or 2 years worth of work for like a whole, like 5 people to do, like making that many radios. So after all those years of work, how much profit did they make? Only $55,000. That would probably not be a lot of profit. So let me ask you a question. How much profit does a big company like Walmart make? So they usually make about somewhere between like 4% or 3%, somewhere 4% or less profit is all the profit that they actually make. But their revenue, they have the most revenue. Walmart has more revenue than any other company in the world, but they do not have anywhere close to as much profit because their profit margin is so small. So like, for example, if you buy an iPhone, I think Apple makes like 40% profit for whenever you buy an iPhone, but Walmart only makes like 4% profit when you buy something from Walmart. So it's really tough to make more profit, and that's why most companies don't make very much profit. Let's see. Let's go ahead and learn some more about it as well. Let's talk about the break-even point. Have you ever thought about that you're going to have a breakdown? So let's, yeah, I can try. Hold on. 55,000, 55,000. 55,000. Okay, so number 10 says the overhead cost is $41,250. That's called the overhead. And then it says a production cost of $25,000. Production cost. And then it says a sold out performance brings in 3125. So that's the that's the revenue. That's not the whole revenue, that's the revenue of one performance, of one sold out performance. By the way, have you heard there's some theater in Wichita that went out of business, I think, recently, and they're trying to sell it or something? It's perfect. It's like the Crown Theater, I think. Yeah, it's like the Crown Theater, I think. Or they might even have two even, but the guy who bought it wants to like renovate it, but then nobody wants him to renovate it because it's gonna like destroy the historic value. So now he's getting sued and he's trying to sue back or something. I don't know, but yeah, so yeah. So let's see, revenue of one sold out performance. So let's try to calculate the cost from this. So what's the cost? The cost is going to be the overhead. That's like the fixed cost. Basically, overhead and fixed cost are the same thing. And then you have the production cost. That's called the variable cost as well. So the variable cost always goes beside the variable X. That's why they call it the variable cost, because the X represents the quantity of things that happen. The overhead cost only needs to be paid once, but the variable cost needs to be paid every single time you do another production. The revenue, what's the revenue? 3125, and that's only if it's sold out. So we're going to assume everything is sold out. So revenue would be 3125 times X. And X represents how many times that they perform. So that's the cost function, and that's the revenue function. And now we have to determine the break-even point. Because if you don't break even, then you might break down instead. So you better break even. So how do you find the break-even point? I'll give you a hint. The break-even point is when after years of blood, sweat, and tears, you finally break even and you pay back all of your initial costs. So basically, the break-even means that you stop breaking down and you actually make back what you spent. So the break-even means the cost equals the revenue. So when does the cost equal the revenue? Well, guess what? That's a math problem, naturally. So we have to solve that math problem. 41,250 plus 2,500x equals 3125x. Oh, there we go. Amazing. Now we're going to subtract actually, which would be easiest? For me to subtract the 3125x and then move the 41,250 to the other side and then divide, or if I just subtracted the smaller x and I would just move it over once and then I divide it.
smaller.
It'd be easier to do the smallest one. So actually, that's a little tip of math. If you want to know how to solve things faster, it will usually save you a step if you subtract the one that's the smaller amount of x's. And also, I learned that from working at a store that if you had like two separate things of like heavy boxes, it's easier to move the one that has less boxes in it, move it over to the other one so that they're all together, instead of moving the one that has more boxes to the other one. There we go. So there's that. I'm gonna subtract the smallest one. So what's 3125 minus 2500? 625, right? So we got 625x equals 41,250, like that. Now divide by what? Divide by 625, right? Good job. Perfect. And then your x by itself equals, it's way too big for me to figure this out by myself. 66. Oh, cool. By the way, how many books? That's, well, in the normal canonical Bible, there's 66 books in the Bible. So that was cool. By the way, here's a fun game we can play. The next time we ever get to the numbers 316, we can remember, and so somebody raise your hand because that's like represents John 3:16. So sometimes I play that game in my class. Whenever we get to the number 316, it might happen sometimes this semester, we can say John 3:16. Okay, so x equals 66. So that's the answer. That's the break even. Well, actually, that's not the full answer. That's just the x value. So the break even point only happens after you've done 66 performances of that performance. How many of you ever been like in the theater or like a play before? So would it be a lot of work to have to do 66 performances? That'd be exhausting, right? So it takes 66 performances before you've even made zero profit. But then after that, on your 67th performance, you'd make a little bit of profit though. So that just shows how much work it is to start a business. So there's a lot of negative stuff in the news about businesses are bad, but actually if you run it, especially a small business, it's very hard and it's really very admirable to run a small business or something and like work hard, try to make things for people. Because it takes a lot more work than people think. So that's x is 66, and how do I find y? Yes, that's right. You're right. I was thinking to myself, would that work? And you're right, it would work. So, but guess what though? I was thinking which equation you put it in though, because that's what I was wondering. Which one do I put it in? But guess what though? Both equations are going to be balanced because when it breaks even, the revenue and the cost are equal to each other. So just pick the easiest one. So which is easier, that one or that one? The second one probably. So let's put in the second one. So just plug in 66. So what's the revenue of doing 66 performances? It'd be 3125 times x, which is 66. So what's 3125 times 66? 3125 times 66. That would be $206,000 equals $206,000 and $250 more as well. So the break-even point is like this. Now, the sad thing about running a business is everybody else in the world who does not run businesses does not understand that when you make $206,000 of money, that really you actually could have actually really just made zero, because your profit is actually zero, even if your revenue is $206,750. So remember that it's not as easy as it looks. Yes. So that, yeah, so the answer, sorry, the answer is both. The answer is this entire answer. So the break-even point basically is the point of time when you have that many performances, and when your revenue has finally grown to reach that much money. Oh, yeah.
So whatever it says.
Well, actually, the cost, for the cost function, you just put in this. Okay, let me put boxes around the answers for this. So the cost function's answer is just this, it's just that part, the part that it just boxed in. The revenue is just that part. And then what was the other answer? What was the third question it asked? So the cost is the part I put in the box, the revenue is the part I put in the box, and then the break-even answer So actually, this is not the answer, actually. That 66 is not the answer. The final answer is both 66 and 206,750. Perfect, okay. So
Oh, you don't know what's for this?
now we're gonna do one more final question today, just for you to have a good weekend.
Yeah.
So this is gonna be question number 11.
Yeah. Yeah.
Are you ready? So let's pay close attention.
Would be the C,
Good job.
so whichever your numbers were. Yeah. 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 Okay, and then the next one, it'll be the R one, which is just the one that.
So it says X, Y, 9Z equals 16, X, Y, and 6Z equals 10, X negative 2Y, negative 8Z equals negative 3. So this is one of those big bad problems you've probably heard about before and like had nightmares about maybe. So, but the thing that always remember that there's a light at the other end of the tunnel. Have you ever heard that saying? So there's really only 3 problems you have to solve. Even in the worst kind of problem like this with 3 equations, there's really just 3 problems you need to solve before you can get to the end. The first equation that you need to solve is to try to eliminate whatever letter is the smallest. So which letter has the least things in front of it? The X, the Y's, or the Z's? The X's, right. So we need to take the 3 equations that have X in them and change them into 2 equations that don't have X in them. So how can we do that? Yeah, so I've heard some good ideas. So what if I took the top 2 equations and what if I subtracted those from each other? What if I subtracted those 2 equations from each other? Would that work? So let's do that. So what is X? What is the top equation X minus the X in the second equation? So if I subtract those, I'm going to say this in words. Top minus second equation equals, it would be 0x, right? Now what's y minus y? 0. What's 9z minus 6z? 3z, correct. 3z. And then what's 16 minus 10? 6. Okay, so stop for a second and remember what we're trying to do. We're trying to get rid of the smallest letter, which is x, but we're trying to do it twice though. We need to get from 3 equations, we need to get 2 equations and get rid of x in both equations. And you can't do the same thing twice because then you'd be going in circles. So is there any other way to get rid of x besides the way that we just did it? What if so let me erase what I just did so you can let me change colors actually. What if I just took the first equation and the last equation? What if I took the first equation and the last equation and I subtracted those together? What would happen then? So let me do the top equation minus the third equation. If I did the top equation minus the third equation, then I would get what? X would be gone. And okay, now this is going to be hard to think about. What is y minus negative 2y? Close, except if you minus the negative, it's actually adding. So it'd be 1y plus 2y actually, which is 3y actually. Yep, 3y. And then what's 9z? Minus negative 8 would be plus positive 8. What's 9 plus positive 8? 9 plus positive 8 is 17, you're right. By the way, if the cafeteria has good food, then you can say that you positive 8 there. If it had bad food, then you can say that you negative 8 there. And then last but not least, oh wait, there's a 316, John 316, but okay. So what's 16 minus negative 3? What is the top 16 minus the bottom negative 3? What is 16 minus the negative 3? It'd be 19, because it'd be 16 plus positive 3. Right. All right, perfect. Now, once you've gotten to 2 equations, you have to pick the pick the smallest one and solve the smallest one. So which of those is smaller? So can I solve that one? How do I solve 3z equals 6? Divided by 3, correct. So divided by 3. And you'll get z by itself. Now, by the way, just so you're clear, whenever I write the letter z on my, let me change colors, it's hard to see green. Change to purple, I guess. Whenever I write the letter z, I always put a line through it so you know it's z. Whenever I write the number 2, I do not put a line through it because to help you know the difference. So the answer to the top equation is z equals 2. Now, once you've done it with this step though, then you're ready to start working backwards. How do I work backwards? So plug this easiest answer into the next to the easiest problem. So plug it into this problem. So take the problem that says 3y plus 17z and plug in the z. Boom, like that. Now, 17 times 2 is 34. So if you're twins and you're 17, you should actually be able to vote because you're technically have 34 years of knowledge. Just kidding. Is that right? Yeah. And then how do I solve that? Subtract 34. 3y equals, what's 19 minus 34? Negative what? 15. Yes, I believe you're right. What's the next step? Divide 3. Then what's the last and final step? Correct. So let me circle that, circle that. So we're 2/3 of the way done. We're not all the way done though yet. We need to find x. So find the easiest equation that has x in it. What's the easiest one that has x in it? Top one or the middle one maybe? How about the middle one though? It's the smallest number. So let's do the middle one. So if I take the middle equation, I'm going to go back to like blue, I guess. If I take the middle equation, which says x plus y plus 6z equals 10, how do I solve them? How do I solve that equation? Well, I have to erase the z, erase that z, and plug in what? Plug in 2. And now I have to erase the y, plug in -5. Correct. So what is so what's 6 times 2 actually? Is it 62? 6 times 2 would be 12. And then x plus -5 is x minus 5. So plus positive 12 and -5. What's -5 plus 12? Positive 7. So x plus 7. What do I do next?
Subtract 7.
Subtract 7 from 10 and you get 3. Yep. Now let me look carefully at the answer. They want you to put the answers in order. So which one should be written first? So 3 comes first, and then y goes next, and then z goes last. That's because that's in alphabetical order. So the answer is 3, -5, 2, like that. Okay, well, that's a good stopping point.
That's the one solution.
Yeah, that's, oh yes, I'm sorry, there's another question on that. It says, is there one solution or, yep, so click on the one that says there's one solution, yep, correct. So there's really 3 parts to one solution, but there's only one point. There's only one point that solves all 3 problems. Yeah. So, by the way, I'm gonna push the homework back from being on Wednesday. I'm gonna even push it back, I think, maybe to the Sunday after Wednesday. Probably, yeah. Yeah, but we still need to work, you still need to work as hard as you can, so good job. Good job, everybody.